Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
As little as long ago, or as far away as forever, this is where we meet to celebrate what never was as it comes to pass. Welcome everybody, I'm your host Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here at freedomslips.com on Revolution Radio, Studio B. I have as guests with me this evening, I'm honored to bring back both Carolyn Hamlin and Dan Duvall to the program. It's been quite a while, and I always look forward to dialogue, fellowship, and discourse with both of you. And you're two of my most favorite people, and I appreciate the opportunity to come together and show in the way that we've been able to do in the ongoing series. And so this is another episode, a continuation. Carolyn, are you there?
I sure am.
Excellent. You sound really good too as far as the mic and all. Dan, are you there, brother?
Yes, I am, sir. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come back on the program.
Oh, it's a blessing to the listening audience and always a good time. You both are doing such, I consider to be very important work, and we're all three really busy doing the stuff that we're doing. And so I thought we could catch up with show by talking about some of the things, some of your latest projects and endeavors. But before we do so, if you would, Carolyn, please give out your website and contact information again, and then tell us, kind of what you've been up to, your ongoing latest blogs and that kind of thing, and then we'll go to Dan and get the same from him.
All right. My blog is beyondthephysicalrealm.com. And I have opened up a new email address. People were misspelling my name. So, it's easy to do, my first and last name. So I've just simply opened up an email address that is called beyondthephysicalrealm@gmail.com. I'm having trouble getting to everybody's emails. Sometimes it takes me like 3 hours to answer one email. And so what I'm trying to do is maybe get more information put on my blog that may help people answer some of their questions. So anyway, I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Daniel?
Yeah, our website is www.bridemovement.com. That's really a go-to spot for anything anyone might want, whether it's links to the radio program, programs that we did with, Carolyn, other survivors. We have a tab for, mind control that has all of that in one place. Other various things, as well as a contact us tab. And so anyone that wants to get in touch with me, they can reach out there, and even if they don't hear from me, they will hear from my lovely personal assistant. So,
well, yeah. Excellent. Well, can you tell us, Daniel? Oh, let me first make the suggestion. Carolyn, I know I get overwhelmed with emails as well, and people that have questions asking me about the various books I've written as well as the shows. And I find that sometimes it's easier to answer them on a program. And so maybe do like a 15-minute video where you respond to all of the backlog, and it might save you some time and having to individualize, personally reply to each one of them. Because, oh, if I did that with all the emails and messages and commentary that I get, that's all I would be able to do, and I wouldn't be able to get any other work done. And so that's just a suggestion. But Daniel, can you tell us what kind of things you've been up to? I know you've been busy and always are, but what kind of projects, what kind of endeavor have been, keeping your focus as of late?
Yeah, well, we launched something called Discipleship Through Bride Ministries, where I am basically hosting 4 classes throughout the week. The goal of the classes is to equip believers. I mean, it's all about getting equipped to deal with the darkness, to more effectively execute kingdom assignment and to live more productively. And so I've had to create those, and it's all my own material. It's all original. And so I've been working pretty hard at that. The last one I made was it's actually almost 50 pages, packet on spiritual warfare I had to do in just the past 2 weeks. I recently released my book, Kingdom Government and the Promise of Sheep Nations, in print. It was just an ebook before, and so we were getting that out. I have another book called Higher Dimensions, Parallel Dimensions in the Spirit Realm, which is now in editing, but I was reviewing that and putting all of that together, rewriting some of it, reorganizing chapters, and that's all been in the past couple weeks. I have a conference coming up in Australia that I'll be at for 2 weeks in November, so that's like flying in. And I have 17 clients I'm working with now. Most of those are 2 or 3 hour sessions with survivors. And at least half of those individuals are what I would consider, really it's more than half, highly programmed. In other words, they've been targeted by military groups, New World Order groups, the Illuminati themselves. I actually call Tuesdays Illuminati Day because I have 3 clients that have all had Illuminati programming back to back to back. And but I'll tell you what, my life is extremely intense, Zen. That's all I can say.
Oh, I can imagine. So, absolutely. And Carolyn, I know you also work with Daniel in this kind of manner. Can you talk about some of your current projects and endeavors and the people you're working with, and then if you could, I'd like with both of you, ask you some of the things that you have been learning, and also, are you both seeing a greater awakening as far as people that are coming out of this kind of situation, now that you've done such incredible outreach, and is there more of an outpouring of people seeking help from you in this capacity, Carolyn?
Well, let's see, where should I start? I am my own project. I'm coming along quite well thanks to Daniel's help. And can you hear me all right?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, good. All right. I'm a Friday appointment with Daniel and have been for, I don't know, maybe a few years. And tell you what, if it wasn't for Daniel and just where he is with God, and I mean, people have no idea what Daniel, they would not want to walk in his shoes. They probably couldn't. It's a special person that's dedicated like that. Not everybody's called for this type of ministry, but I'm just thankful that Daniel's in my life and able to help me, because there's a lot of spiritual warfare that goes on. And I mean, that's what we do, is spiritual warfare for me, spiritual warfare for deliverance, spiritual warfare we do together in a session, sometimes for other people, because you asked about some of the things we found out. One of the things that we found out, I don't know, maybe Daniel knew this before, but I found out my system actually, this was like, I don't know, a year or two ago, I don't know, a year and a half ago, found out my system actually is attached to many systems, like a grid, at least across the United States, of other survivors. And anyway, we've done spiritual warfare, and believe that God was telling me, and I think Daniel probably has had the same experience, where I believe that at the time when we first started doing warfare, I mean, God showed me what he was going to do with this, and that there were going to be fruits from this, because there are a lot of people that are attached together. There's just programming is so sophisticated these days. When they first started programming me back in the 1950s, it was like sometimes I tell people I feel like I'm like Rosie the maid on the Jetsons. You know, it's like an outdated model, but they've done some upgrades. It's like so where they started with me. Well, even like my parents back in the 40s. What they have now is just it is so out there. It's hard for people to believe. So some of that Daniel's been farther than I have with this, because he deals with some very, very highly programmed people who have been highly programmed, and a lot of the listening audience that thinks that they have an open mind will have to stretch their minds. But you know, the good thing is that people are going to really get this when they're going to realize what the kingdom of God is all about, and that it isn't just the third dimensional realm. And when they spend time listening to Daniel, like these classes that he's doing, and some of the stuff that he's talking about with the spiritual warfare he's doing, Christians and other people, that they're probably, a lot of people they don't understand what Jesus actually came here to teach. So that's probably why there's a lot of people that would be Christians, follow Jesus Christ, if they actually knew what Jesus taught. And I hope, you know, maybe we'll get into some of that in this program. It's a lot of people may think the way I'm saying it that I'm not scriptural, not going to be scriptural, but I'm telling you that God is equipping the saints now, and he's beginning it. That's one of the things that he's shown me and shown Daniel, and a lot of it is coming about through the spiritual warfare that some of us are doing, not only here in our physical bodies praying for people, but as we are in the Spirit, through the Holy Spirit, being guided by the Holy Spirit. And a lot of this is helping people that have been programmed, because some of the programming takes place in other realms. Sounds crazy, but just follow away what I'm saying and just listen, and you're probably going to start learning some stuff and start seeing some truth. I always point back to the Word of God. It is in the Word of God. You can find it yourself. You can read it in context with yourself. We're not out of the Word of God. So I don't know, I guess I'll just better shut up before I talk myself into some circles.
Oh, no, we appreciate your response and your insight, Carolyn. I mean, for those of us that have never, you know, been through this kind of a thing, as far as a personal experience or having come out of those kind of circles, I mean, your insight is invaluable. And, you know, for those, because there are so many that are awakening to perhaps having some kind of memories, lingering memories of being involved in some way, but still not able to put their finger on it. And so your testimony is invaluable as far as help for them. And then, you know, the website and the work that both of you do, I'm sure that, you know, being able to reach out to you and to contact you and to even listen to the shows that you both have already done, and is of such great benefit for them, because this is unique. I mean, and most of the world does not understand the degree, nor that really that this is a spiritual war. Most people are only living in, you know, the third dimension of the physical world, and they think all that exists is the 9 to 5 in the matrix, you know, getting an education and getting a job and then retiring when you're 65. I mean, for most people, that's like all that there is. And so this other aspect and this other part of what's going on, it's not well understood. And so for those that have a foot in both worlds, again, it's invaluable. Daniel, would you mind talking about some of the things that you are learning, some of the things that are coming up in the sessions. I know, and I wouldn't ask you to mention any names, keep everybody anonymous for certain, but if you could share some details of some of those things that you are learning about and that you are having to contend with.
Oh my, Zen, that's a dangerous question. You know that, right?
Oh, of course, yes.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of things. We, like Carolyn mentioned, they can do programming in other realms. What is another realm? Okay, in our world, we have length, width, and height. Those are 3 dimensions. Most people can understand that. The reason why we can move and walk around and experience our world the way it is because it is a 3-dimensional world, meaning length, width, and height. Now, a dimension is an extension in a given direction. That's what it is. So length is a dimension because length is an extension in a direction. Width is a dimension because it is an extension in a given direction. When I put length and width together, perpendicular one to the other, I create a 2-dimensional plane. When I add height to that and I get another, perpendicular line to both length and width, and I call it height, that creates a 3rd dimension, a 3rd extension in a given direction. That's a 3-dimensional plane. Well, quantum physics takes us far beyond 3-dimensional planes into higher dimensional spaces, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
Right.
And a lot of physicists are now, they have different theories out there, superstring theory, M theory. Time itself is a temporal dimension that allows for the passage through space that's measurable. And, so another realm is essentially a place that is outside of the confines of the 3-dimensional world we live in. If I have a 2-dimensional plane, a piece of paper, and I put it in a 3-dimensional room, like the room can contain the paper, but that, like if I draw some stick figures on that paper, they don't know, the stick figures, that they are being contained by the 3-dimensional room because they're in the paper. The 3-dimensional room, that's outside of their dimension, but it contains their dimension. So stick figures are inside of a 3-dimensional room. They don't know it. Us, we are inside of a 4-dimensional space. A 3-dimensional space is contained by an overlap by 4-dimensional spaces, 5-dimensional spaces, whatever have you. And so we are surrounded by activity we are not aware of.
Right.
This is how you cross over into the spirit realm. But as you cross over into the spirit realm, what you find is that the 3-dimensional world in which we live is not the only realm that exists. And that's where we get this conversation opening up calling it other realms. Like, let's say I have 2 pieces of paper now in a 3-dimensional room. I draw some stick figures on the first piece of paper, and then I draw some stick figures on the second piece of paper. Those stick figures are essentially in parallel dimensions. They're not aware one of the other, but both exist in the 3-dimensional space. So you can have essentially what manifest as parallel universes or parallel worlds. We've found alternate timelines, past, present, and future, that are manifesting in other locations within higher dimensional spaces. And these actually, because you have some of these entities, these cosmic beings and so forth, they have abilities to, and maybe it's not their abilities. I'm not sure all of the mechanics. There are ways to create them, pocket realms, secret realms. You don't have to have a whole universe in a realm. A realm can just be a place, a building, a single building. Let me give you an example. In one case, I was working with a survivor, and they had a part, and this part was a librarian. And this librarian was a librarian in a library that was in another realm. Now, if you went outside of that library, there was a lawn and then nothing. So the whole realm was literally that library. And in that library were documents on all kinds of scientific research and technologies and occult workings and everything that do not exist on Earth to our knowledge. I mean, they told me some of the titles of the papers. I'm like, what? They had a file in there. There were files dating back to what read as 65,000 BC. I mean, it's just crazy stuff, right? And in that library, there would come different kinds of beings. Some of them would be the reptilian kind of beings, and other kinds of fallen angelic orders. They would use this library. Well, they also, on a couple occasions, abused the librarian. And so when we discovered the librarian, we got the librarian back. And then, but this is a higher level warfare. I actually called upon the armies of heaven. We basically smashed to pieces all of the spirits that were ruling over and occupying the library and kicked them out. And we actually took the entire realm of the library and displaced it. And I know this sounds strange, but this is exactly what we did, to another realm in the heavens where the evil spirits no longer had access to their library. And, what I say, when people ask me, like, what kind of level of warfare are you talking about, Daniel, when you say, if I told you, you wouldn't believe it? Well, that's it right there. I mean, we collapse realms, we move realms, we kick spirits out of their own territory sometimes. Carolyn can tell you about a story involving her in a false present is a part of her. And I don't know if she wants to get into that right now, but when we rescued that part, the angels of the Lord came in and we emptied the entire realm. I mean, and when you do that, other people that have been implicated by these agendas in the heavens also get set free simultaneously. The Bible says in Ephesians chapter 3, it says, to the intent that now the manifold wisdom of God might be made known by the church to the principalities and powers in the heavenly places. In other words, God is graduating a group of believers that are going to get it to the extent that our rule and dominion not only manifests on earth, but extends from earth into the higher realms of the dimensions where the principalities have been executing all kinds of nonsense, garbage, and crimes against humanity to destroy their stuff in the name of Jesus, which is one of the reasons why the Bible also says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, Ephesians 6:12, but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, and spiritual wickedness in the heavenly places. We try to oftentimes just make that phrase, heavenly places, mean whatever battle's facing me in 3D world in front of my face right now, like this person that's being mean to me at the stoplight. Well, spiritual warfare is a lot bigger than that. Spiritual warfare takes us into the spirit realm, higher dimensional planes. And if you really want to know where a lot of the science is being developed by the dark powers and the Illuminati themselves, their research labs, are in other realms. And I've been told this. And so we're talking about stuff that's extremely relevant, yet hard to explain without proper, background and some foundational understanding of how things work. So there's one item.
Well, that's really amazing. That's kind of like Jedi Knight kind of stuff. But before we move on from this topic, can you answer, is this the library that you're speaking about? Is it sort of like in a Akashic Records, a Halls of Amente type of thing? And then also, if you would, comment on CERN, if you know anything about that and how you see that. Is that like a Stargate? Is that like a dimensional doorway type of thing that they're putting forth effort to bring in interdimensional beings, as it speaks about in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth?
Yeah. I've had to engage Thoth in person. Not that I actually saw him with my own physical eyes, but we've had to engage him in the heavens. The library, as far as I understand it, this particular one actually belonged to him. So sorry, that was a good day for us. It belonged essentially to an ancient one, that the library, it was theirs. Mm-hmm. So that's what I can say about the library. Is it like an Akashic record? Yes. It's not a physical library on the earth, but it contains a lot of information.
Right.
Um, Now, as far as CERN, do they want to use it to open up into another dimension like the abyss or the pit, or like, Anthony Patches, some of his interviews have suggested, one of these prisons on Saturn. Well, I don't know exactly where they're trying to open, but I can confirm that as far as my knowledge goes and some of the information I'm getting back, CERN is a huge part of the plan to open portals to bring things in scientifically. And so, yes, I mean, yeah, some of the speculation about this being a very occult undertaking, I can confirm that. I believe that's absolutely true. I don't think there's anything good about CERN. I think there's a very significant reason why you have Shiva outside of the CERN building.
Right.
This is basically a six-armed Hindu goddess standing in a portal. Like, well, what is she doing there? Are they trying to give us a hint? I think so. And I think that they actually would like to have done more with it by now, and God is getting in the way, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And when we get back, we're almost to the first break. So when we get back, I'm going to pose that same question to you, Carolyn, and get you to comment on that as well. And then, we can go into whatever else you would like to talk about, because I know you've got a few things that you would like to make mention. But before we do, would you like to share any kind of commentary, Carolyn, as far as CERN, what you think about it, and then we can pick it up on the other side?
Well, I can tell you, I don't know a whole lot about CERN. I haven't taken the time to look at it. And one of the words that Daniel used was scientific. One of the reasons I have not looked into CERN is because I've noted that there's other portals that have been opened. I've been involved in some of that myself, and it isn't that they don't have portals. Even in the deep underground military bases, there have been portals opened. There's people that can spiritually open portals, and in fact, a lot of humans are being used as portals, and so that's another topic.
All right, hold on, Carolyn. Hold on, Dan. We'll be right back, everyone. In the Emerald Tablets, 3 lines, it says, "Out of the great deep were they called by the wisdom of earthmen, called for the purpose of gaining great power." And so, what Daniel was talking about earlier, it reminds me of that movie, The Matrix, and how they were able to jump in and out of that particular dimensional reality, and also how the way that the world was working was much like a facade where everybody was going to school, going to work, the whole soft parade was ongoing, but behind the illusion of all of that, there was this war between those that had that knew about the Matrix and that were able to unplug from it, and those that were part of the overseers and the gatekeepers, those that were seeking down and hunting those that were knowledgeable about the Matrix. And so it's kind of kind of like that, the spiritual warfare which is ongoing behind the scenes of, the everyday world, the physical reality that everybody is so caught up in. And so, Carolyn, can you make further comment on what I know you didn't know a lot about CERN, but if you would just talk about or comment on the things that we've been speaking about in the last 10, 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Well, mentioning the Matrix, people would be amazed how accurate the Matrix is, the movies. And I couldn't believe it when I saw the movie, because there's like espionage groups just like that. I've been a part of one. I've had people contact me that have told me about it, even though I haven't told them about my experience. But it's just so similar. It's just amazing. And there's groups that are stealing information. There's people that, even in the Matrix, the movie, there's like different degrees of density. You could walk through walls, and
Right.
it's just, a lot of it has to do with the mind and knowing who you are and what body you're in. It's really amazing. And even in somebody's system, like in mind control, it can be like the movie The Matrix. And it really takes spiritual discernment from God himself to understand what's going on. It's Holy Spirit guided. And of course, that only can come through Jesus Christ. I testify of that over and over, because that's the absolute truth. I have been on the other side, working for the other side. And the more I do programs, the more I want to, what I'm hoping to do is be able to paint a more accurate picture that there is no real gray area. I want people to see what is of God and what is not of God. And just because something may sound like the Matrix or crazy or just can't possibly be true doesn't mean that this stuff isn't true, is not happening, that it's like what Daniel was talking about, the different dimensions. It could be like folded on top of one another within the same type of space, in a sense. And even time travel. There's just so much that's, I don't know where to start, really.
Hey,
but,
Carolyn, why
Yeah.
don't you talk about the part of you that experienced the entire lifetime in that other realm,
yeah.
with the dream that came
Yeah.
to you that was a whole lifetime? Yeah, why don't you talk about that one?
Yes, there's some other reasons why I happen to like a couple of like Star Trek episodes. Next Generation, Captain Picard experiences an entire lifetime. Well, I also have experienced an entire lifetime, and it happened within one night's sleep, maybe a few hours. And not only that, it's like I've been tied to that reality for at least 15 years, maybe 20 years. But I'm not the only one that has experienced that and is experiencing this, which is another good reason to bring it up. I'm glad you brought that back up, Daniel, because I think people are going to listen to this and they're going to be able to relate and go, oh my gosh, I wonder why that's been happening to me. Maybe there's something to it. Well, I'll tell you what, I guess I should say what it turned out to be. It turned out to be a test, so to speak. It's kind of like if you have a holographic image, a holographic program, you put somebody in the, like in Star Trek again. That's such a good example. Somebody's on the hollow, what do you call it? The hollow something or another. They're in the place where it's a hologram. They can actually interact with everything. It's like everything's third dimensional for them. It's a world. And if they didn't know it was a hologram, they'd think it was the world. Well, this is the way it can be for some people, but it will come back as a dream. But it is like, it can actually be more clear of a memory than what happened to you yesterday. And your very spirit tells you, or your soul, it's like tugging at you. It's like, I belong there. It's like, why do I feel this way? I have another life. So what we found out, gosh, I don't know where to really begin with that. I keep thinking I should go back and just basically tell kind of what happened, and then I'll just do that. Well, it was a whole life from being a child on the way up to, oh, probably in my early 40s. And it was, gosh, the parents, the friends, going through school, who my friends were, what I did after school. My dad was high military, and Mother High Society. It really would make an excellent movie. And people have heard me tell this story, say it ought to be in Hollywood. Well, it's even more bizarre than just something you'd see in Hollywood when I found out what it was. So kind of like the Truman Show, the movie The Truman Show. They were watching him, and
Right.
this is kind of what they do in the Illuminati with programs. They take pieces of people, they test them. This is like a test. Let's put this person or these people within this scenario, within this type of situation, and let's see what they do. And it kind of predicts what they'll do. Well, what was shown to me was the group I was with did not respond according to what these people thought that we would, which actually was a good thing. But I was so tied to this lifetime. Get this. I was married in that lifetime. Well, I call it a lifetime, but it's not like a past life. It's not like a present life. It isn't a life. It was a piece of me, a piece of my consciousness put in this artificial world with other people. And they were real also, pieces of them. I didn't look the way I do now here. I mean, I was dark-haired, short-haired. I was very athletic, which I am now. It was a special ops team I helped develop. It had to do with the Coast Guard and just a takeover that happened that our group was able to stop in this particular situation. I was wounded, almost died. I was in a coma for like 9 months. The man that was part of my team ended up taking care of me when I was in a coma. I was like in a coma, I don't know, almost an entire year. And I was never able to walk again without assistance. But when I woke up, I found out he had been taking care of me. He was a quite large black man, for the proper way to call him. I don't know why people bother with proper names. I don't want to hurt anybody, upset anybody, but he was a black African American. Well, I was in love with him after that. He was a very good friend. In this life, I was in love with him. We got married. He took care of me, and I realized I was never going to have children again because of how I was wounded. But we were able to save the takeover. Actually, it involved the entire United States military, and it was quite involved. But I was very happy in this situation. And this person was a lot of the person I admired that I wished I wanted to be. I even drew strength on her character through my life. The last 20 years of my life, I would think, if she can do it, then I can do it. So that's how tied I was to it. So get this. Daniel was going to try to help me deal with this, to investigate it. I had a choice. He gave me a choice in our session. Let's look at this, or let's look at something. It was like I was involved as a child with some terrible child pornography. A lot of people have been. A lot of people in the Illuminati have experienced, defectors have experienced a lot of different avenues of victimization. I would have rather faced what happened to me. I remember some of what happened to me, but I didn't remember all of it. I would have rather faced that than face trying to give up that reality that I had, because I was so tied to it. But when we prayed, Daniel and I prayed, God showed me what that reality really was. It was not a reality. It was not just a dream. It was like a program, and part of me was still in it. It's kind of hard to describe. I don't even know if you can describe how that happens. It's just that in this type of sophisticated type of splitting and programming, they can take pieces of people and just their person and put it somewhere else. They can even put it inside of another human being. It's just out there. It's just crazy stuff. But anyway, Daniel and I prayed about it, and I'll tell you what, I wanted to get rid of that program. I wanted these people to go back to their families and their homes. It's like God showed me. Even the man that I was married to in this particular scenario had a family. Well, if you're split, you cannot live your life as a whole person. God wants people to be whole. And so just in that situation, what God showed me and what God showed Daniel, I wholeheartedly believe that there's some people out there that now are more whole than ever. They may not know why, but they are. So that's kind of a long story to tell, but that's it.
Well, that's amazing. So you're saying that you're releasing that aspect of yourself that gave him the opportunity to also release it, whether he was conscious or not of it, like you were, and then that way he was able to put his focus on the other life and his other aspect, as far as his other marriage, or and that others, also the same kind of scenario, if they are able to release, I guess, preoccupation with that kind of thing, that they're able to then complete themselves in wholeness and put 100% of themselves into that reality, that dream, that kind of that dimensional self. It is difficult to find words for that, but
In order to just kind of simplify this, just for people that are listening, let me give a really oversimplified example. Let's say I have a bowl, and that bowl represents the program or the false reality, the false present that Carolyn is talking about. And so I need to occupy that bowl with people. And I have 3 pieces of glass, a green piece of glass, a red piece of glass, and a blue piece of glass. Well, that green piece of glass is Carolyn. That red piece of glass is the African-American gentleman. And that, the other piece of glass, well, that's just another person. Now, I take all 3 pieces of glass and I shatter them on the floor. So now there's a bunch of pieces on the floor. Now, when I shatter the glass, that's me introducing trauma into the individual's life in order to fragment them and dissociate their whole person, like God created them to be, into a bunch of pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I take a piece of the blue glass and I take a piece of the green glass and I take a piece of the red glass, one piece from that pile of pieces on the floor, and I put them all into the bowl. So now I have a bowl with 3 pieces of glass. That's 3 representations of 3 people. The majority of those people are not in that bowl. They're on 3D planet Earth. They're laying on the ground in pieces. They're broken people. But because I'm evil and wicked and diabolical, and I want to run scientific experiments using this level of stuff, I will take those pieces and remove them so the person does not even have access to the parts of themselves that they need if they're ever to become whole, and I put them somewhere else. Isn't that sick?
Yeah, that's very evil.
This is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I guess most people without, an outlet similar to you, Daniel, aren't able to even become conscious of those other outside pieces. And then they may feel a disassociation or like something is missing from them, but not truly ever understand why.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
A lot of me felt like I was her. A lot of me is her. It's like a lot of the person that I haven't been was able to be. See, I wasn't allowed to express myself in certain ways in my life because my life was pretty much guided the way my handlers wanted me to go. But it's some of me, like if I could have done my life the way I wanted to, there's a very good chance I would have followed the route that this particular woman did. That was me. So naturally, what they do sometimes is they try to find something that's close to a person's heart. They will use that to bind this person because, I mean, even like out of the body work, people don't, if they want to keep doing whatever it is that they're involved in, it's going to be hard for them to say no to it. It's I love outer space stuff. So a lot of people that have been used in that area. So it's hard for them to want to give that up because, if they feel like they're a loser on planet Earth in third dimensional realm, maybe they've tried the best they can, but in circumstances, stuff has happened. Maybe they've had handlers that have prevented them from doing what they want to do. Who knows what the dynamics are? But if they have something going on that they really like, and they may not even know it's reality, but they want to keep returning to it, then that's going to keep the other side using them, whether it happens to be human beings using them or whether it happens to be Satan's spiritual hierarchy using them. And one of the things that can help people, if they don't know they're being used or not, if they suspect something like this, if they start journaling, that's one of the first things they can do. Start journaling. It's amazing how much memory will come back to you when you start writing. You think you remember it all, and all of a sudden it's like you're painting your own picture. You think, oh, I remember what was in the corner. As I'm writing this, I'm seeing the picture fully. It's just something about it. That's a start. Start journaling.
Yeah, I know myself as a writer, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Daniel, even though I personally have never had any kind of an experience like this or haven't come up in a situation like this. I know that writing itself, the experience of it, that it gives me the ability to introspect and to really look at and come to understanding on feelings, motions, just things that are within me. Like even with my whole life, I've really felt close to God, and writing has helped me to tap into that, to explore that more in depth. And so I'm sure that that would be a great way for those that have undergone traumatic experiences like yourself to ground themselves and to look into that, at a deeper level, utilizing writing as a tool for introspection. Daniel, you want to comment here?
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna echo. I mean, you basically said it, and so did Carol, and I don't have much to add.
Yeah.
People that have gaps, they don't remember their childhood. They have bouts of dissociation. Common ones that speak to bigger problems are depersonalization. Just going through your day, suddenly something happens and you don't feel like you are yourself. You've depersonalized. Derealization. You are just going about your day. Something happens and suddenly your atmosphere doesn't feel like it's real. You feel like you suddenly stepped out of life and you're living in a dream world, and then you're back in its real life. That's derealization. Some of these kinds of things, rapid switching between emotional states. I don't know why, but every time this happens, I just go into a blind rage, and there's no ramping up, there's no ramping down. Well, okay, when these things are happening, this speaks to deeper issues and problems like you would find with a person that's been fragmented on purpose, programmed to get those memories back. It helps to write it down. Just start writing. Just say, hey, I don't know what happened in this part of my life, but, well, when I think about this missing area of my life, I feel, what do you feel? Start there and just begin to just journal. You will be surprised what comes up.
Okay, when we get back from break, I wanted to ask both of you if you are familiar at all with Al Bielik's story and how he was part of the Philadelphia experiment, and him and his brother had jumped off of that boat and they found themselves in the future. And then he said that he had been there for long enough to experience much of that future, as far as what had happened over there, and he got to learn some information, brought it back, and did videos. Are both of you familiar with that story at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Little
well,
bit.
when we get back, I want to ask you about that. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I have as guests with me this evening both Dan Duvall and Carolyn Hamlet. I do want to remind the listening audience, just really quick, that Revolution Radio is the largest listener supported, commercial free, corporate free entity radio network on the internet and on the planet, and that we appreciate your support in the very many ways that you do, in as far as the fellowship that we share, and all the different hosts on Studio A and Studio B that come to you 24/7. We appreciate the dialogue, all the incredible questions, and even the current events, the stories that you share with us. We're learning from you as much as you are learning from us. And those of you that can, please do go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button, purchase access to the archives, or purchase the bullet drive with all the incredible emergency information or the non-GMO seed pack, that those kind of things go a long way in enabling us to continue to be able to come to you as a platform for truth and being able to talk about all the many esoteric things that we do cover in bringing forth such incredible guests as those that I have with me in this show this evening. And so thank you in advance for doing that. And your support enables us to keep coming to you in the capacity that we do. So, Carolyn, I'd like to go to you first. And if you would, can you tell us what you know about? Because you had mentioned the time travel and about how these dimensions are kind of overlapping the way, and that the world really is sort of like the depiction of the movie as portrayed in the Matrix movies, which are incredible. If those of you that have not seen them, they are very profound and deeply layered in meaning. And so, if you would, can you talk about what you know about Al Bielek's story and how that ties into really even your own situation and circumstance?
Well, it's a pretty interesting story, to say the least. Um, if I can tie into it at all, it would be that I've often wondered if my own father had been a part of that. My own father's story is, I mean, I've never really told his story. I may have mentioned it on a program or two that I've tried to tell it a few times, like on the internet. The internet got on like 2 forums, got shut down within like 2 or 3 hours of the time I posted. They lost one forum lost their entire history of years of posts, and one forum only lost a few days worth. And was it a coincidence that I just posted about my father, the story of what happened to my father? I don't think it was coincidence. The information was taken off of my computer, and I've had to rewrite it since. And I've been knocked off of radio programs when I've tried to tell the story. I don't know for a fact that he was in that experiment, but even the friends I've told about some of the things he experienced and he did tell me about, they've wondered that. So my father was pretty much, his life was just pretty much taken from him. I don't have time to talk about it on this program, but he was used from the U.S. Navy. He was used as human experimentation, and they pretty much stole his life. It'd take too long to tell about it. But I really think that maybe the reason they kept tabs on him and they made sure he didn't talk, and they kept him in a hospital if he did try to talk, or they put him in a hospital. The only reason they let him out of the hospital after they had messed with him back in the early 1940s. It was, I don't know how long he was in the hospital at that time, but they told him that they wouldn't let him out unless he signed the papers and said that if anybody ever asked him what happened to him, he'd tell them a lie, that he'd say that a plane part fallen on his head and he'd been in the hospital. Well, that wasn't the truth. And I didn't know the truth from him until, it was probably a few years before he passed away. He was in his 60s when he passed away. I didn't know my father. I heard the story from my mother. And then his story, my parents separated when I was 1.5 years old because, and that's a whole nother long story of why, but my mother had to leave. She was told to try to get my dad out of that situation with the military and the family, to get him out, just sever all ties with everybody, and her and him leave, or they were never going to have a decent life or a family that was going to have a decent life. So he was going to go with her, but at the last minute he changed his mind. My mother cut ties with him and the family, and I didn't get to really know my dad till a few years before he passed away, and he was able to tell me a lot of his story, and it matched up exactly with what my mother said. I don't think anybody else in my family got to hear that story from my mother or my father, but so much as it died with both of them. My mother died in 1971, so I do know a lot of what happened to my mom And I try to make that public. I wish I knew more what happened to my father, but it was another person that was involved in some secret programs and was pretty much messed up the rest of his life. It's totally amazing, though, that he was able to have the mind that he had. Very intelligent man, to be able to have the mind that he had in spite of all of that. So as for I'd like to mention, I don't know too much about this particular ship. It's off. I mean, we'll come back to that topic, but if anybody wants to look up the USS Nimitz, if you look up the patch, that's like a warship that was, I think it launched in 1972. If you look at the patch of the USS Nimitz, to me it looks like it's going through a circle, and I'm thinking that there's stuff with that actually involves time travel. And I do have like an altar that's been involved that has told about certain things that she knew from how time travel was done, how she was able to do that. And the Nimitz actually comes up with some of that information along with with like Project Mannequin, and there's the nuclear submarine that's Commander Anderson was the commander of. That was a Nautilus, and a lot of stuff was happening in the late 1940s and the early 1950s, early to late 1950s too, with some of the experimentation and secret stuff with the government, and from what I've heard, time travel too, and in code. Some of the things that I did I was a code carrier, and I was not suspected to be that because I was like a little girl. So, you know, the little girl carries a code, and they think the person with me was the decoy. I mean, they think that I was a decoy, but actually the adult would be the decoy. So there were some pretty slick things that were going on at that time. And also with the time travel and also traveling through dimensions, the reason they use somebody like me and people like me is because sometimes codes were kept not only in different locations, parts of codes kept different places. Sometimes a part of a code was kept in another realm. And so they had to have a person that could actually go to the realm to retrieve it or to relay it. So it's just mind-boggling about all of that. But I'll turn it over to Daniel. Daniel, I'm sure, has much more information about this Philadelphia experiment and time travel than I do.
All right, one
Thank
real
you.
quick comment before we go to Daniel. It sounds similar to Andrew Basaggio's story, the lawyer that talked about using, these jump rooms and how they were able to go to these different teleportation devices, and how he was, as a young boy, involved with his father in Project Pegasus and some other time travel experiments. And so, similar to your story there, Carolyn. Daniel?
Yeah. So this is a conversation it's really hard to have
Right?
if you're going to try to think about things, as unidirectional, as everything goes in one direction and there's only one direction and it's forward. If you're stuck in 3D thinking, this conversation, it really is a really, really hard conversation to hear or have. And, the truth is, to really follow this, and I've had to learn this, is you just have to say, you know what, I surrender 3D thinking. As a
Right?
matter of fact, for us Christians, the Bible says that, the spirit of man knows the thoughts of a man, and the spirit of God knows the thoughts of God. And we have been given the spirit of God. So who has known the mind of the Lord? He may instruct them, but we have been given the mind of Christ. And we have access to a mind as believers that really does comprehend all these things and understand them very clearly. And as we lean on him, and lean not to our own understanding, a lot of these things do actually come into focus and make sense. And what I've realized essentially is that uh, a lot time itself, one, time is a dimension, right? You have length, width, height, those are dimensions of space. Well, time is a dimension of change, and it measures change. And so um, while we experience life like, we're in a 3D world, and if I get up in my 3D chair and I walk through my 3D door out my office, I'm walking along a timeline that's manifesting, through 3D space, right? We think that time's going forward. But in reality, 3D space is interfacing with a whole other realm called time that transports us kind of, through that space. So there is an interfacing with the realm of time that we all engage with. But since time is a dimension in and of itself, there is some traversing that can take place. And Montauk was really big on this, and that came after the Philadelphia experiment. And, but they did a lot of exercises trying to look at other realms, past, present, and future. That's what they were doing. They were sending kids through this portal, opening it up with this chair in order to find the coordinates and get information from other realms. That's a lot of what the experimentation was about. As a matter of fact, at one point, they were trying to figure out if they could stop the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which they couldn't. Go figure. So, but the thing is, right, if you look at the Bible, it actually does make a lot of sense for this reason. In Deuteronomy 30:19, it says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy descendants may live. And essentially what the Bible is saying there is that men have choice. And most of us get that. Like we could choose, person cuts you off in traffic. You have a choice to cuss them out, or you can keep your mouth shut and hold your peace. Like that's a choice. That's a real choice. You don't have to cuss them out, And so the Bible says you have a choice. God, in this situation, said the nation of Israel had a choice. They could choose life, which is follow his covenant and his law, or they could choose death, which is not following his covenant and his law and bringing upon themselves the curse. Well, in order to set before someone a choice, that means both death and life have to be created and present. In other words, if I say, would you like an apple or an orange, Zen? And all I give you is an orange, what you would say is, well, you're not really giving me a choice. You said apple, but there's no apple. I can't pick the apple. All you're giving me is an orange. So in order to give you an apple and an orange, I have to take both of my hands, pick up an apple, pick up an orange, and hold them both in front of you and say, which one do you want? Well, the same thing with God. He actually creates life and death. He creates blessing and cursing. As a matter of fact, in Isaiah 45:7, it says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Well, why does he do that? Why does God create evil? Well, because people can choose evil, therefore God has to create it in order for them to walk into that. Now, before you arrive at the point of decision, where does the evil exist? Well, it exists as a possible future. Where is the possible future stored? Well, this is the idea that when you're looking at people jumping in and out of times and looking at other realms, past, present, and future, oftentimes it's not the actual past that manifested, but a representation of it. It's like it's a reflection of it in the spirit realm or in another realm entirely on another dimensional plane. And so in those areas, you have possible pasts, false presents, and potential futures. And they exist. You can look at them. As a matter of fact, when we get to that point of decision in our timeline, people's choices will either bring them in or push them out. But all choices exist prior to that point in time where a choice is made. God stored them somewhere. And I think that this is oftentimes what happens when people say, they fell through a portal and ended up in a future. Because the future that they looked at may not be the actual future that manifests, which is the really interesting conversation when you get back and you say, well, they said that they saw this and it was happening at this time or this year. And then guess what? We get there on our timeline and it didn't happen. So you have possible futures. They don't necessarily have to manifest. Well, I think the Bible is very clear. God created it all. And through scientific and ritual and occult processes, there have been ways to backdoor access into some of these things, to look at it, to glean information from it. And Philadelphia experiment, in my opinion, was an example of that playing out in real time. Like they this thing happened. They did go into a possible future. They did see what they saw. Then they came back and they told about it. Doesn't mean that it's what's going to manifest, but it's something that, well, exists in the realm of possibility.
which is just mind blowing in itself. But
Yeah. I
uh,
have something I can add.
sure, please.
I don't know if well, it's just something that one of my alters had said that had to do with time travel. It's just, she used to, it's like I know how it is, but so it's hard to put it in words. But one of the things that she was able to put in words, and I just throw it out. She said that, and of course and it is me, that in interdimensional time travel, that the way that there's a beacon that works to keep one on the proper timeline, and it works like sound waves. And she said like a tuning fork that sounds out a sound that resonates across the timeline from one beacon to another. And a person that is traveling needs to know the vibration of that beacon or have a device with them that's tuned to that vibration. And so this may be like, I mean, there's just like different types of time travel through the century. Not, I shouldn't say through the centuries. I mean, like from going back like the 40s or 50s compared to what they're doing now. I mean, I know with myself, it's like what I know about is nothing in comparison to what Daniel knows about, and like what, I mean, I don't think I was at Montauk, but I know some people who have been, and it's far beyond what I know, when it comes to this sort of stuff. So
It's
like,
very deep,
yeah.
profound, because there's
Yeah.
people that speak about these parallel dimensions, and that these like timelines that are running congruent, but almost like Bizarro world. It's different. The circumstances and situations and outcomes are different in that particular dimension, whereas this one is um, what we see as the norm, but that they're running congruent and parallel to one another, but that things are different as far as timeline and outcome there, just like Bizarro World, as far as the whole Superman thing with the alternate Superman and that kind of thing. But I wanted to ask you both, too, before we get to the next break. Have you heard about the time travel story from Jeremiah, concerning Jeremiah and Abimelech? Um, do you know what I'm talking about at all?
I don't.
Okay, well, I'll just give you kind of a scenario about it. It's from a pseudepigraphal book called For Baruch, and it talks about in the story, which I'll put a link in the chat room after I talk about this. In the story, Jeremiah asked the Most High to spare Abimelech, who is one of his servants. Baruch is his scribe, and Abimelech is one of the people that help him and Baruch out, and that do run errands for him and everything, and he asked God to spare him from the coming destruction, where Jerusalem and the temple are about to be destroyed, and the people are about to be exiled, for 70 years and taken into captivity, and so God tells him to tell Abimelech to go gather figs, and that he would spare him from the coming destruction. And so he does so. He tells Abimelech to go out and to gather some figs, and then Abimelech does so. He goes out, gathers some figs, and while he's out there, he falls asleep out in the grass. And when he wakes up, it's 66 years later. And when he comes back to the city, he's been spared from the destruction, and in 4 years, the people will be returning from the 70 years of being, exiled into Babylon, and Abimelech asked an older gentleman at the gates of Jerusalem, where Jeremiah the scribe was. Jeremiah the prophet was, and Baruch the scribe. And he tells them that they've been carried off into captivity, and that, they've been there for 66 years now. And Abimelech looks at the old man and, pretty much just thinks he's a nutcase, um, and that something's wrong with his head. And so he goes and he asks a few other people. We'll come to find out God had spared him from being a witness to the destruction. And according to Jeremiah's wishes, he slept for 66 years. The figs that were in his basket were still fresh. They still had milk pouring from them or leaking from them to show that they were fresh. And so this whole story, if you've not read it, it's a very fascinating, very intriguing story. But it shows that the Most High God, if He so chooses to, He can put people in different timelines and make them go into the future or the past according to His will and to His wishes, which just lets you know that He has all power to do anything that He intends. And so, Daniel, do you know what I'm talking about as far as the story?
No, actually, that's news to me too.
Okay, well,
So,
let me post this into the chat room, and then I'll post it into Skype as well. And maybe the next time we do a show, you both can read it, and then you can comment on it, because it's, as I said, it's truly fascinating. And then it gives you a biblical perspective of time travel, and lets you know that, these kind of things are not just fantasy or science fiction, but that they are actually biblical as well.
hmm.
Okay, well, we're almost to break, so before we get there, Carolyn, you want to give out your website information again? And then Daniel, if you would, if we have time. If not, we'll do it when we get back.
Okay.
It's beyondthephysicalrealm.com. Beyondthephysicalrealm.com.
Daniel?
Yep, and people can find me at www.bridemovement. That's BRIDEMOVEMENT.com.
All right, well, we should be into the next break. And so if anybody has any questions that they'd like for me to ask either Daniel or Carolyn, post them in the chat room and I will get to it. We'll be right back for final segment. Welcome back, everybody, for a final segment. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen. I have as guests with me this evening both Carolyn Hamlet and Dan Duval. Carolyn, I know there was a couple things you wanted to bring up over the course of show. So let's use this last final segment to cover some of that, and then, of course, if we aren't able to get to some of the things you want to talk about, certainly with your willingness, we can do a follow up at some time whenever Daniel's has some time and availability. But Carolyn, floor is yours.
Okay. All right. First, I'd like to go back to the topic we were talking about. It has to do with time travel in the Bible. And there's something I was thinking about, and a friend of mine just reminded me also, same thing, about there's a story, and I'm rusty. I'll tell you what, I'm sorry. I'm rusty on some of the Bible stories. So, I mean, I read a lot more in the New Testament, and I say that because I do want to get more into the Old Testament stuff. I'm just being honest. I need to read more of it. And the more I read about the Bible, I get excited. But there's a story that's always intrigued me that has to do with the sun that was stopped for battle. And from what I understand, even NASA was not able to, I think a equation was actually solved by someone that was a Christian at NASA. And when the people at NASA couldn't solve some type of an equation, he said, wait a minute, I know something about the Bible. And so they went to the Bible, looked at what that was, and figured out whatever, I don't know, they figured out the equation because of what was in the Bible. Are either you, Zen or Daniel, familiar with that story and can tell the audience about it?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Daniel, do you?
Well, I'm familiar with the story of Joshua commanding the sun to stand still.
Sun and moon, yeah.
And it did.
Right.
And they continued to fight. And that was in the physical 3D world. I mean, it's just one of those things, like, I couldn't explain it if I wanted to. But, as far as the NASA scientists, not so familiar. So.
Right. Okay, well, then I'll catch people up on this story. And I actually cover both this intriguing story and as well as Isaiah chapter 38, where it talks about the sun going back 10 degrees on the sundial. Both of those are part of my latest and newest book, where I decrypt the book of Enoch. But anyways, what Carolyn is talking about is that there was missing time, and so that they weren't able to calculate all of, as far as past history and all the past eras. They weren't able to, there was something missing. And so this particular individual knew about the story of Joshua commanding the sun and the moon to stand still so that they were able to finish up the slaughter of the giants that were occupying the land of Canaan. The sons of Anak, which when they went in there, they were taking over the inheritance that had been usurped from them by the children of Canaan, the fourth born son of Ham, because he stole that land from Shem and the children of Shem, and they were not supposed to be occupants of it. And so when the people, the Israelites, were taken out from the bondage of Egypt, they were led into the land of Canaan and told to wipe out every man, woman, and child because they were the seed of the serpent. They were these giants, and they were, cannibals. They also offered up their children in sacrifice, and so the Most High wanted to slaughter them all, just like he did with the flood of Noah's day. And so when they were able to calculate in that particular missing portion of time, then it all clicked and fit together. That's what you're talking about, Carolyn?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Fascinating story. Anyways, I'm turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things, always a lot of things I can talk about. And of course, I think they're all important. But one of the things I definitely wanted to get to on this program is, and because this may save somebody's life. And you'll know why I'm mentioning this when I'm finished telling you. I recently opened up a new Facebook profile. It's attached to a public figure page. Some friends of mine had asked me to do that because they missed me having my articles up there for like easy posting. So I went ahead and did that. And I'll tell you what, I've got some wonderful friends that have come in. I've really been so blessed. And one of my new friends told me, I mean, she did come out right away telling me this. It's just I got to know her after chatting with it. She told me that my testimony's been such a blessing to people. You know, that's always nice to hear. And everybody wants to hear that when they have a testimony. I'm just so thankful I have the opportunity to tell it, and that lives are being changed. And so I just want to thank everybody that has come forward to tell me that, and also the ones anybody that they tell that if somebody's life has blessed them, to let them know, and they probably have no idea how much their lives have blessed somebody else. But this person's name's Ashley. I asked her if I could give her name, and her last name's Griffith, but she, a new friend, a really good friend I know, but she told me that there's the program that I did. I think it was one that Daniel and I did 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe I've even mentioned this topic before, but it was a program where I was talking about when I worked in a satanic hierarchy that we used to do out of body travel. And one of the things we used to do was we would go to we would go to like an airliner or a school bus or something where I was told these people were going to die. That I don't know if they were going to die or not. I was just told this. But what we would do is we appear to these people. Sometimes some of us had like they're like ascended masters. One of them would be wearing a suit. See, they don't always dress the same. So one would be wearing a suit. Maybe one would be wearing a clown suit, trying to get the attention of a child. Maybe one would look like an angel. But the point was that we were telling people that they were going to die, and that if they did what we told them to do, and that they went to the light, that they would feel no pain, that we would take them out of their bodies and they would feel no pain. So I actually thought I was working at this point. I thought I was working for God's hierarchy, and I was helping people. So I was all for this. But I found out that, of course, just before I left the spiritual hierarchy, they showed me who they were, and it is Lucifer is Satan. It is Satan's hierarchy, and the plan is, well, just what the Bible says. Satan's here to steal, kill, and destroy. That's the basic foundation of the bottom line of it. So they are working for Satan. They're not here to help you. So what I said, the reason I told that story on the old interview, the older interview, was that I wanted people to be safe. I would tell people, call on the name of Jesus Christ. Don't go to the light. The safest thing to do is to call on Jesus. So Ashley told me that she had listened to that program, and she told her husband about it. And Ashley, I think, was a new Christian at the time. Her husband, I don't think he was a Christian at that point, but she didn't. I don't think she thought he believed it at that time. But a few months later, he actually had a heart attack, and she told me that during this heart attack, these beings appeared to him, and they were trying to separate him from his body, and trying to get him to go to the light. I mean, he was conscious of this happening. He was not out of his body, but he could see these beings. And I was thinking, I wonder what they're dressed like. And then I realized it doesn't matter what they're dressed like. The thing was that they did appear to him, and maybe he would have gone to the light, but he actually remembered, in that state that he was in, he remembered what his wife had told him about me saying, go to call on Jesus, don't go to the light. So he called on Jesus. He called on Jesus Christ, and he was saved, physically saved. And after that, even the beings tried to come to him in other dreams, but in actual dreams. I mean, this was a physical thing he happened that he suffered from the heart attack, and he's been healed from it. But a couple of times later, they still tried to take him from his body. And she said that he said it was like being pulled from his body, and that they were trying like an attempt to get him to, first of all, get him to want to let go of his body, and an attempt to separate him from his body. And that they'd both seen, before they were Christians, they'd seen like the Harry Potter movies, and that they remembered what the Harry Potter movies looked like, and were relating that to like what they call the soul sucker demonitors that were trying to just suck the life out of people, the literal life. So she also said that he had, I'm trying to look from the words that she said, that when he did call on Jesus, he repented. He asked God to forgive him. I think that's what she was saying. Repented of his thinking that he was going to die young. So even a thought that you're going to die young could even wear on your mind. But Jesus did set him free. And she told me last of all, which I thought this was beautiful. I mean, it was all beautiful. And the reason I'm telling you guys this is because maybe you'll remember not only that I've said this, but somebody else's story will put it in your own mind that this is what to do, to call on Jesus. I've told my own children this. I've told this story to my children, her story, and I'm hoping that if anything happens to them, they'll remember that too. But what she said was that she knows that if she's going to die, she's not going to talk. See, she says if she's going to die, she's not going to any light or to anyone. She said, I'm calling on Jesus and out for Jesus. When Stephen in the Bible was martyred, he stated he saw Jesus. So here we have a biblical example of what to do, or that Stephen saw Jesus in the heavens. So we don't have any of this going to the light business. I know so many verses taken out of the Bible, out of context, that are being peddled. I mean, for I don't know, a couple hundred years or more, they've been peddled as saying they're saying something they're not saying. Some has to do with the third eye. Some has to do with, well, it's like the esoteric stuff. And I am going to come back and sometime or another on a program, and I'm trying to get to it on my blog. I'm going to take these verses and I'm going to tell people exactly what they mean. But you don't have to wait for me, because if you read the Bible in context, go to it and read it for yourself, you will see that you don't have to sit there and meditate and try to get a really out there meaning. If you listen to what Jesus said and read it in context, you're going to get what he says. You're absolutely going to get it. And that Jesus even said that the simple-minded people understood him. You don't need some stinking ascended masters giving you flowery words and difficult things, to just these large words to impress. They're just trying to impress. They're not trying to help people. You don't need all that. And you need the Holy Spirit of God to understand things. And it's quite often it's a simple person that can see it. And you won't see it if you think you're going to get it by meditating on a few words and not reading what Jesus said in context. So
Well,
that's it for that. What I was going to say there.
let me comment real quick, Carolyn, then I'll get Daniel if he wants to comment also. With the whole New Age and so many people, the strong delusion coming up, and even History Channel setting up these ancient aliens as our creators, or that they're going to somehow come and save us. The New Age movement and these ascended masters, they know that not a lot of people actually read their Bibles, and not a lot of them even understand what Yeshua said, or what Jesus said, or what he's told us, revealed to us through the New Testament, through the Gospels, through the teachings of the apostles. And so they know that they can twist and manipulate and get people to believe and buy into this whole New Age philosophy, and in that way they're able to lead people astray and to get them primed and ready to bow down to these Nephilim gods. And in my opinion, that's part of the strong delusion that's coming upon us as being the final generation and being at the end of days. Daniel, comment?
Well, yeah, I agree. They are prepping people to bite the bait. They want to sell a new world order to the world. They want to sell it. That means that everyone's going to buy it. And, you know, this actually lends itself to a conversation Carolyn and I were preparing to have on your program. And really, with the time we have left, I don't know that we'll be able to do it justice. But, you know, the idea that they're using this figurehead, which is the new pope, who is a Jesuit, by the way, to really preach this message of, you know, global unity and his version of it. They're prepping people to buy into this system that they want to bring in, and it's a multi-phase prepping that they're doing. Ultimately, they want people to buy into light beings and gods, but then they also want people to buy into the idea that through initiation into what these beings have to offer, we will be gods.
Right.
That and that offer humanity something that we need. And we want they want to convince us that we want it. And so, you know, they have a plan in motion to bring it in, to sell it to humanity, and they're going to use supernatural signs and wonders to prove their case. You know, one of the things that the Bible says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, when it talks about a great deception, is that it talks about when the Antichrist is revealed at the removal of a restrainer, he will come with all power and signs and lying wonders. You know, that's a supernatural light show that's going to accompany the arrival of this person, the son of perdition, who they plan to be the ultimate representation of their agenda. Well, all that we're seeing, the ascended masters are part of this and everything else, it's, in my opinion, all playing together to say, you know what? We're going to offer humanity the ultimate counterfeit to what God intended. Because, you know, God always intended for us to be his family. He intended man to have dominion in the earth and to rule and reign with him. And, well, Satan deceived man. Man fell. We lost relationship with God. And that dominion that God attached to man, well, we lost the ability to exercise it the way God intended for us to exercise that dominion, because it has to be exercised in relationship to him. Right. So what the devil did after that shift happened and Adam sinned is that he came in and said, well, you know, I have power and I can use your dominion to get all kinds of things done. So let me pirate you, and I'll give you a couple Skittles and you give me your kingdoms. And, you know, what the devil has perpetually done throughout history is just hijack man and our dominion in order to push his agenda forward. But, you know, in these last days, in contrast to what the devil is doing through people, you know, hijacking their abilities and all that is inherent to the human nature, God is trying to put a revelation through as well. Like, okay, Jesus is coming back. He has a plan to give us glorified bodies. He has a plan to cause us to rule and reign with him throughout all eternity. He has a plan to, in this life, unite men and women to himself in relationship and to exercise the dominion he put in us through right relationship with him in order to combat the darkness. So God actually is, at the same time these people are raising up a case to sell their new world order, I believe God is raising up people that are sold on his agenda to confront it and to say, you know what? No, I don't need that counterfeit. I actually have the real thing. I have the real God of heaven and earth living on the inside of me, who is able to work power through me that literally embarrasses the powers of darkness. Like I was saying, I mean, some of this higher level warfare stuff speaks to the fact that these guys really aren't all they say. Because you know what? I told you about how we took the library away from these guys. Look, the angels of the Lord took their stuff, and they couldn't stop them. You know how many believers to pray that down? 2. My clients, right? What happens when you multiply that by thousands?
Right.
I didn't tell you about the sacking that happened in Thoth's throne room the other day as well, or the sacking that happened in Antarctica that happened a few weeks ago, because they have a spiritual kingdom. Satan actually has a throne over the earth. It's in Antarctica. I don't know that it's in the physical realm, but I know it's there.
Well, there's a lot of things that, I think really people have not caught up with yet. But God is the one who has the power that is beyond all the power of the devil, the ascended masters, and the entire realm and government and order they want to bring in. Because in contrast to the New World Order, people need to understand that God has a kingdom. And his kingdom is glorious. It is full of truth and righteousness and hope and joy and peace. And he establishes it in our hearts now and in the future. He will overtake all the kingdoms of this world and establish his realm, but not before he lets the devil get a shot at putting his counterfeit through.
Amen.
So, man.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, we're definitely going to have to touch upon that topic of Antarctica in a different show. But Carolyn, we have arrived to the end. I want to give you a chance for final comment.
I feel like I just wish we had more time for a lot of things, but it's like I just wish people could hear more of what Daniel could say about the kingdom.
Right.
And it's like most people have no idea. You're probably teaching it, Zen, but a lot of people are not hearing what Christianity is supposed to be about. We're not supposed to be wimps. It's like the church. No wonder people are going for other spirituality just because the supernatural's out there and there's power and you're a good person. I mean, it makes sense that you think that was from God. I used to think that, and I was brought up to believe that until I found out that it's not. That it isn't that way. There's like the two sides. So I'm trying my best to help people, or just point the way to get people to read the Bible, to find out that they don't have to be neutered Christians. Yeah, there are a lot of Christians sitting back there. They think that getting saved is it. Oh yeah, I'm getting saved. Okay, I'm gonna sit and wait till I die so I go to heaven. That's not it. Not even Jesus. He didn't want us to just sit like that.
Right.
That wasn't what he was preaching. He was preaching the kingdom.
Well, hey, thanks both for joining me, and